Hey there, School of Tomorrow students, Pythonistas. This is my second video of September 1st, 2019, Sunday morning. I started my day watching the CBS Sunday Morning Show. I'm just setting the context in terms of where this video falls on the timeline. There's some talk about Tulsi Gabbard here, which is not unusual for this channel around this time, and talking about Quakers, and I actually embed the interview with Jim Mattis, General Jim Mattis, at the bottom of this blog. So that's what's going on in the world, you could say. It's just really a token timeline thing, and we've been talking a little bit about 2 Dickinson Street, partly because I'm up to like 100 views in the last video, Studying in the Global U, not the directly previous video, which this is a continuation of, but August 31st. And I think that's because I shared it with the 2D talk list, which is pretty much a quiet list. So JupyterLab is part of the ecosystem we use a lot. And for example, when we study the radioactive decay rates of various elements, how they transmute into one another as they sort of come down the waterfall, you could say, turning into more and more stable things if they are able to, but sometimes at a very slow rate, and there's the half-life issue and so on. So we do a lot of this stuff in what I call the calculator of tomorrow, which is just a fancy way of referring to all these, quote, computing surfaces that we now have free of charge if we can get the hardware that we need. In this case, that would be a MacBook Pro built around 2009. Does a pretty good job. The fan has come on. We've got a lot of applications running, but you'll notice that we're scrolling through. You may not notice, but this is the case, that we are programming in Python. We're making use of very fancy third-party objects such as data frames and so on, but to use anything we still have to write Python. So this is continuing our learning experience, and in this continuation of the previous September 1st video, I'm looking at, again, issues of scope, the rules for scope. We've got a fresh kernel just started here on the right, and I'm just going to share stories 5 and 6, which introduce the nonlocal keyword. You may remember I mentioned in the previous video not including that. Well, now I'm going to include it, but not in story 5. In story 6, I'll include it. In story 5, we set a global Mara Vegas to Mare Blum, the string Mare Blum. Then in the function Vegas, this callable object Vegas that takes no arguments, we're going to again define internally to that function another function called Mare, which returns a string value, but notice how it binds itself explicitly to the global Mare Vegas. Even though it's nested and down inside, we want it to just ignore the immediately surrounding Mare Vegas, Mare Blob in this case. Just ignore Mare Blob and go ahead and pay attention, please, to the most outermost, most global Mare Vegas. So when you do run this function, which it won't run when I return it at first, it's just going to define it and return an object ready to be run, right? So this doesn't actually execute. It doesn't actually get called inside of Vegas. It gets defined inside of Vegas. And when you define a function, that creates a callable type of object, which I then return, right? But not before I have a print statement, just to double check on what Mare Vegas is at line 19. And this is the slightly tricky part, because the way functions are insulated and sort of segregated, or you could say contained, you want some kind of wall so that you don't interfere with more outer values inadvertently. So inside this function Mare, we are going to mess with the global mayor of Vegas. We're going to change the value there. But the function Vegas doesn't need to know that. It doesn't really care about that. It's not the function mayor. It's the context in which function mayor is defined. And in Vegas, mayor of Vegas is mayor blob. And that's not going to change just because we do some function defining. We're not running this recall. There's no real opportunity for anything to change. So mayor of Vegas inside of Vegas stays mayor blob. So what I expect on line 19 is whenever I run Vegas, it will say mayor blob inside of Vegas. I don't see any reason that should change. And then I return the function mayor. So getMayor gets to be that function. As a result of calling Vegas, getMayor gets to be a function that I then call. And what do I expect? I expect it to say mayor bleep because that's the global mayor right now. It was bound at the time, and it's just going to be that, right? It's going to be that globally for everybody. So I expect mayor bleep twice. Once because I'm calling the function, having set it to mayor bleep, and once because I'm confirming that it's changed at the global level. So let's run this and see what we get. But inside the function, of course, it does echo back that mayor blob is, just for a brief shining moment on line 19 and line 14, something internal to the scope of Vegas. Now let's look at story 6, my last story in this particular sequence. Here we're setting a global to mayor blum, as usual, but here's the non-local keyword, finally, on line 16. And what this is going to do is change the attention of the function mayor to just look outside the door here by default. Now, if I took this out entirely, for example, if I just commented this, what would be happening there? We would be creating a local variable and returning it, and we would not be changing anything outside of the mayor function. The fact that I put non-local instead of leaving it blank or putting global is I'm now explicitly linking these two in such a way that I can actually change the value of the outer Vegas, the outer mayor of Vegas. But you know what? I'm not going to in this because all I'm doing is defining the function, not calling it. So there is no opportunity, once again, to really do anything to change the value of mayor Vegas inside of Vegas from anything but mayor blob. So I expect when I call Vegas to once again have mayor blob come back internally inside of Vegas. But then once I call Vegas, or call what's returned by Vegas, i.e. the function mayor, what I expect in that case, of course, is mayor bleep, because mayor bleep has been defined as the mayor of Vegas. But this C is only going to affect the surrounding value. And since we're not going to be looking at it at any future point in this program, it's really, what it does is it keeps us from changing the global in this case. So the global is going to stay mayor blum. Let's run this and confirm. Let's do a reset, run this and confirm, and then just do a couple little final tests using this story, not going to another story, and just confirming our understanding. So I'm going to hit the green arrow. Again, what I expect to happen, I expect to get a function back called mayor that knows that mayor bleep is the mayor. But in doing these machinations, it's not going to have affected the global. So when I ask for mayor of Vegas, that's still going to be mayor blum. Run this. And there we go. It's briefly Bob inside, blob that is, then bleep, then blum. Blum has never changed. That's always been the global. Now what happens if I comment out line 14 inside of Vegas as if it doesn't exist? This is actually going to cause an error because non-local directs Python to actually find a matchup, something it can bind with, not at the global level. and it's not going to find anything this way. So when I hit the red arrow, or a green button, I'm sorry, not the red arrow, the green button, the run button, it tells me explicitly this is actually a syntax error. That's kind of one of the more basic primitive errors you can have. So I definitely need to have a variable outside in that space. Question, can I move it from above to below? Like, can I define it down in this area, but not indented? Is this going to be a problem? Let's try it. So that's not a problem. Defining mirror Vegas further down, it's still in the same lexical scope as Vegas and therefore available to non-local. All right. So that'll do for now, and we'll continue with more School of Tomorrow Python all over the place. Don't feel like you have to go forward in time to get all the best Python. There's a lot of Python already in the rearview mirror from the point of view of chronology, and this particular recording dates, a lot of it is in another environment called Codesters, which is going to look like it's for little kids, and not little kids, but pre-college, even pre-high school. It's going to look that way to a lot of people because of your cultural assumptions, but you don't have to treat it that way. It's not necessary to treat Codesters as a purely kids-only environment. So regardless of your age or mental age, it's a great workout with the calculator of tomorrow, you could call it, to follow some of my Codesters videos. And then my practice, you'll find as you look back in my channel, is to gradually wean you off Codesters and sort of push you in the direction of Spider. Kind of assuming that you start with a more graphical, cartoon-like environment, even back to Scratch, MIT Scratch, which is really cartoon-like, forward through a little bit more lexical language, Codesters, and then away from pretty much any native graphical stuff into a more adult, we would call it, IDE, such as Spider here, or Jupyter Notebooks. But you'll see, of course, once you get back into JupyterLab, Jupyter Notebooks, you're back to having graphics, plots, and so forth. In a way, we're bringing back some of what we lost in Codesters, including even real-time 3D visual Python exhibits, which I am short on right now in this particular part of my history. I've done a lot with Visual Python and hypertunes in previous chapters, but on this laptop, I'm not really set up or equipped to go back over that material. So check YouTube, hypertunes, also Coffee Shops Network. These videos in this channel also somewhat demonstrate what I mean by hypertune in the way they can be easily networked with one another, but kind of without the continuity that you would expect from a smooth, you could call it smooth hypertune. You can use that word. All right, more about hypertunes another time, and enjoy your Labor Day weekend. That's what's happening in this part of the world.